Welcome to EoZTV. I'm Elder of Zion, and my guest today is Joshua Washington, who's the director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Thank you very much, Joshua, for coming.
Hey, Elder, thank you so much for having me here.
No, I really appreciate it, and it's especially fun. This is really something. The and I really want to hear what you have to say. I mean, I saw your article that you wrote in the Times of Israel, and it was a really good article. Although again, it looks like it was about Israel rather than about what the stuff that's happening right now, which what we want to talk about. Yeah, but it was called
Absolutely.
the Palestinian appropriation of black pain, and we're going to get to that. I do want to talk about and it's a theme on my blog as well of how Palestinians try to essentially hijack a lot of causes, and the black cause is one of them. But most importantly is obviously what's happening right now. We
Mhm.
have a an issue right now. Obviously, we have the George Floyd riots that are going on, and I just wanted to know first of all how you're doing.
Yeah. I'm doing fine. I'm with my wife and my son, and we're doing fine. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now, and in terms of what's going on with what happened with George Floyd and how he was murdered by Derek Chauvin and all that. I mean, it's definitely been a tense time as far as just the work that I do, not only with Israel but just educating in general. It's very high emotional time, um, but but internally, I mean, there's we'll talk about it, I'm sure, as we go. But there are some things that are angering. There's some things that are frustrating. Things that I see as cycles that kind of keep repeating themselves. Um, that are frustrating. But other than that, we're doing okay. We're doing fine.
What do you when you say cycles that are repeating themselves? What do you mean by that?
Well, there's been, I mean, I know we'll talk about this too. I guess we were talking about it right now. It's, one of the things that I've noticed and I've been noticing is that what happened with George Floyd and both the protesting and the rioting that we've been seeing that follows it has happened before. Um, Not too long ago, just a few years ago, and it happened kind of in the same way. After what happened with Trayvon Martin, with Mike Brown, you had an angered black community, and what we had was both peaceful protests, and we had rioting that wound up destroying our own communities, our own, locally owned black businesses that have had to pack up and leave. That after they've collected their insurance money, they said, okay, I can't restart my business here because now insurance is going to be a lot more because of all the rioting that's happened here. Entire livelihoods that have been destroyed, and you know what I see as our economic independence and one of our ways to better success as a community. We keep dismantling. And then on top of that, kind of defending that, as if that somehow is going to bring change. It's actually setting us back some more. Maybe we can understand the anger, but the self destructiveness of what's been happening has been one of the things that's been, like I said, that I've seen before, and that's one of the things that's just been frustrating in general. You know.
Okay, no, and I can certainly understand that. It's I mean, again, these demonstrations are all associated with the organization Black Lives Matter, and
Mm.
as you know, I certainly have a problem with the organization Black Lives Matter because of their anti-Israel statements that they've made, and as well as their in their manifesto. Um,
Absolutely.
how do you distinguish, or do you distinguish, between Black Lives Matter as an organization and the actual concept of Black Lives Matter?
So, well, so the phrase, I mean, just the phrase on its own, is true. I mean, Black lives do matter. The and part of the thing that, and I'll talk about the organization in just a second. Part of the thing that makes it, I think, difficult, makes the conversation around it be potentially very tense, is because of the, I think the name itself has a lot to do with it. Is that somehow if you don't like the organization, then you're saying that Black lives don't matter. And then so when people say some people say all lives matter, and then people who are part of Black Lives Matter see that as an attack. And you know, it's for me, the organization I have many issues with. One of them, it was a big one I wrote in an article just recently, the Times of Israel, that talk about not just Black Lives Matter, but how Black movements in the Black community, how they've been hijacked, to serve a particular purpose, or just the vision has been changed and obscured. And with Black Lives Matter, however, I've never been on board with the organization. One, because of their national platform and their stance toward Israel. It's a very harsh stance. It's not open for interpretation. It's not ignorance. It's whoever the people are on the top who are setting the policies for the organization. They know exactly what they're doing, what they're saying. So it seems very intentional and pointed. I mean, you can't just throw on words like genocide and apartheid and accuse Israel of imprisoning 4-year-old Palestinian children, like if you didn't either think that that's actually happening, or you have an intention to lie on the state of Israel. So that was the one thing. I mean, there's a couple other things that I didn't agree with, but the most recent thing that I just found out, and you can go on their website and look yourself. If you go to their Black Lives Matter website, I think it's .com or .org, I can't remember, and there's a button to donate. If you look up at the URL after you click the donate button, you're at a different website, and that website is a site specifically for donations to Democratic presidential campaigns. Mm-hmm. And if you go on there, if you look on, there's a site called opensecrets.org. It's a nonpartisan website that just shows you where money is going, mm-hmm. different organizations. It shows you that almost 100% of their funds go to the presidential campaigns. So you give directly to this organization whose 98% of their money goes to presidential campaigns, and you see that when you donate to BLM, you're actually donating straight to the Democrats. And I mean, which it doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. But the point is, even if you support all the Democratic candidates, that's not what the vast majority of people thought they were donating to when they donated to Black Lives Matter. They thought they were giving to the organization, not to Joe Biden's campaign or Elizabeth Warren's or anyone.
I mean, I saw that's Act Blue is what I believe you're speaking about.
Act Blue, yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I believe that Act Blue just acts as a clearinghouse so that donations are tax deductible charities. In other words, there are a couple of organizations, more on the left that I've seen than on the right.
Yeah.
And I look at this because, hey, I want to get donations too,
Right.
So it's so I believe that's even though it is obviously aligned with the and there was a lot of Bernie supporters, so that is aligned with the far left, but I don't see it as quite as nefarious as that. And somebody tells me otherwise, only because I really do think it's just an easy way for an organization to just ramp up and get tax deductible donations without going through all the legwork of doing tax deductions. I'm sure a piece of it ends up going to Act Blue. I'm sure of that. But again, that's just my impression, for what it's worth. But it's certainly, there's not a question that Black Lives Matter is aligned with the far left.
Absolutely.
I'm uncomfortable with. I'm not sure how many Black people in general are uncomfortable with that, but it certainly makes me uncomfortable because there's political things there that I disagree with, and a lot of people, and maybe you can speak about this, a lot of people try to make it look like, well, if you are against us, if you're against our politics, then you must be a racist. If you're against our
Right.
politics, then you clearly don't support Black lives. And this is,
Right.
I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, because it makes me angry. But if I'm defensive, then that sort of proves it. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. I mean, it is, and then in that way, it is kind of a trap. Like you said, if you get angry, then you're being defensive, which then kind of helps prove their point. And they say things like, "Oh, if you're angry, then maybe there's something you need to change about yourself or whatever." But see, it's such a game, because I know I have friends who are Jewish, who want to and have been a part of Black Lives Matter and have been at rallies, and there are other movements that are like this as well, very left leaning, and are on the surface they say they're for this issue, but then at some point while they're there, whether they're at the meetings or at the rallies, they feel pressured to, and they actually are confronted by other members to denounce the Jewish state. Um, they've been picked on for raising a concern about Israel, like someone who's speaking talks about Israel in a way, and they challenge that, and then now they're the pariah of the group. I mean, we've seen this even in like the women's march was the same thing. They say, okay, if you're a supporter of the state of Israel, then you're not welcome here with us, which kind of like excludes a lot of Jewish people. Um, and yeah, and it's emotional. So a lot of my peers, a lot of my Black peers, I should say, are members of Black Lives Matter. They support Black Lives Matter, and it's a very emotional thing for them, because it's they are they seemingly champion issues that are kind of at the forefront right now, and so it pulls at your heartstrings. So anyone who would say anything against the organization, for the people who are emotionally tied to it, they're going to be met with a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback, because like you said, if you're defensive, then you're a racist, and if you don't like this group, then obviously you don't care about Black lives, and not really looking at it, at the very least to say, okay, I, as a Black person, if I wanted to join, a Filipino, civil rights group, because I live in my hometown has a really very large Filipino population, and if I wanted to join, a civil rights group, or a social justice group, and then I found out that their charter says some pretty nasty lies about Black Americans and some things in history that aren't true, even though the people I met were nice, I would raise the issue. I would say, okay, why is this in your charter? This isn't true. And I would leave the group if I felt like they were being hostile to me for challenging them. So why do we expect our Jewish friends to just kind of swallow it and be a part of this group that actively calls for the removal of their home country?
Sure.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean that Jews and Zionists couldn't march along
Right.
with everybody, because the cause is fine. Yeah,
Right.
and luckily, and we'll talk about it again later. But luckily, even though we've seen the anti-Israel crowd try very hard to hijack this, I don't think they've gotten there yet.
Yeah.
They're still trying, and and they'll try to associate it with the deadly exchange and all that, this other crazy stuff. But again, before we get to that, I wanted to finish with, before we get to Israel, because that's obviously an important topic. But
Absolutely.
the other thing I just wanted to throw out there, and I just saw this right before got on. I'll just bring it up on the screen. Is at Brown University, the administration, 21 Brown University senior leaders, starting with the president and the provost, sent a letter called "Confronting Racial Injustice," and they and the one of the teachers that teach at Brown University, who is a person of color, named hold on, I got to bring it up over here. So I'm sorry, you can't see this, but
Mhm.
is I apologize.
No
Uh,
problem.
the Professor Laurie, it looks like his name is. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
He was not happy with it because he's like everybody's being forced to, and like with this moral authority, they're being forced to sign something that goes beyond just you know only saying okay we support Black lives, and there's this what social justice warriors. He said the letter they had to sign. He said it trafficked in the social justice warriors' pedantic language and sophomoric nostrums. It invoked race gratuitously and unreflectively at every turn. It often presumed what remains to be established. It often elided pertinent differences between the many instances cited. It reads in part like a loyalty oath.
Mm.
And so I'm just wondering what you have to. Obviously, you have to. I want you to read this first before you give a real comment on it. But like he mentions the 1619 project. I don't know what you think about that.
Hmm.
That he's a critic of that. But it's the loyalty oath is the part that that struck me because, as I said before, it looks like people are being you have to say this for us. You must have this opinion, or else you're going to be tarred as a racist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, um, yeah, that is for to me that's not that shouldn't be our goal as Black Americans, because you can't police someone's thoughts. You can't really. I mean, I remember I saw. Um, I'm a basketball fan. My favorite team is the Sacramento Kings, and and I saw that the announcer, I think, of the Kings, um, he and this other basketball player, he plays for the Kings as well. They had kind of had a history of not really getting along,
Mm-hmm.
and the player tweets him and asks him what he thought about Black Lives Matter, the movement. Um, and knowing what his response would be, I mean, the whole thing to me when I read about it seemed like a setup. Like he just asked him what he thought, and he said, hey man, haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for reaching out. My opinion, I believe that every single life matters. And then just a little bit later, he gets suspended from his job for a little bit. Um, and because I guess the owner of the Kings is a big supporter of Black Lives Matter, and to me that's not the same thing as someone at all as someone spouting hateful rhetoric or discriminating against someone on the basis of their skin color. They just don't agree, with something. Like internally, you can just say, okay, I don't really fully agree with that. Um, and so I didn't hear about what happened at Brown, but I have seen different footage of, just an overcompensation, I guess is what you want to call it, is of, not just, okay, we want these things, or we want these things to be more fair, or we want equity in these areas, but it's like, we want to stamp out racism, which to me is just impossible because, not everyone who's, first of all, I mean, it's just not possible. Not everyone who's racist is out there with, pitchforks and KKK hoodies on looking for Black people to kill. Some people are just, that's just what they think. That's just what's in them, and we can't really do much about that if we don't know what they're thinking, except for trying to draw out what they're thinking and then punish them for it. I mean, that's just doesn't seem productive to me. And one of the things that I appreciated about, um, there's a couple of different quotes from abolitionists and even from Dr. King. So Frederick Douglass said, and I love this quote. He was talking about, obviously he was an advocate for freeing the slaves, and he addressed the critique of, or the argument of, what are we going to do with the slaves once we free them? Because they're gonna need something. I mean, we can't just free them and just let them go. They're just gonna starve to death. What are we gonna do with them? And his simple answer was, do nothing. Let them be. Your doing is what is. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, your doing is what caused them to be here in the first place.
Uh-huh.
Just let them go and let them do what they're going to do. And for me, I stood by that as to say, we don't we shouldn't want, or our goal shouldn't be to make everybody love us. It should be um, to rid the country of whether it's policies or laws or whatever that are in place that would discriminate against us,
Mhm.
because those things we can see and we can attack. Someone's feelings or thoughts,
Sure.
um, opinions. I mean, how do you police that? I mean, making everyone sign a pledge. That's getting kind of you know. I mean, what kind of society are we going to turn into by doing something like that? That just doesn't work.
No, I understand what you're saying. Thanks for that. The
Mm.
So again, you are. I mean, I don't know. I know that it was founded by your father. I don't know if you're the head of it right now, but the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Um,
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about how it was founded? What's it doing? What exactly it's into? It certainly looks very interesting. So can you give us a recap of what it's about?
Sure. Yeah. So the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, IPSI, is an organization that my dad founded back in 2000 and I want to say 2012.
Hmm.
It came after he. So my dad's always been uh, a Zionist. He's always been, just even as he tells us, even as a kid, he was always fascinated with the Jewish diaspora.
That
He
is.
remembers learning about Ethiopian Jews when they came to Israel. He was like 8, I think, and
Mhm.
and he just remembers seeing it on TV, and it just captivated him. So that's been always something that's been a part of his life. Um, and then around the 90s and the early 2000s, he became more and more fascinated, and he would study more and more the modern state of Israel, about 90 early 90s, pretty much when I was born, 1990. And he, knowing, doing his research, knowing who true Israel truly is, and looking past what the news headlines have said, and books later, and all this research and people he's and friends he's made over the years. He kind of had his position, but the uphill battle I think that he had was just that there was so much opposition to Israel, and particularly out of the black community. And um, he just happened to be doing some research in a library, and he found some old newspaper clippings of an organization called BASIC, which stands for Black Americans Supporting Israel Committee. And BASIC was founded by Bayard Rustin, who was Martin Luther King's one of his right hand men. I mean, they're really close, and he helped Martin Luther King with a lot of things. He organized events for him, even helped him with some of his speeches. And um, Bayard Rustin founded BASIC just a few years after Dr. King was assassinated, and it was a black Zionist civil rights group that stood on the principles of not only standing with our Jewish brothers and sisters, but condemning and standing against the terrorism, and even coming against and condemning our own black brothers and sisters for embracing terrorism and standing against Israel. And so it was just something that he just I mean, I remember that day my dad just felt like it was like he struck gold. He found it, he posted it all over the internet, so people could see it. And then just months later he formed IPSI, um, in almost like in that honor, of BASIC. And it served as a great deal of resource for us. And so IPSI is now, it started off as kind of like a supplemental organization that gave information to other organizations, that educated. So my dad would speak all over the country, at other events, and meet with other leaders, and gave them tools and more knowledge on the black community and the Jewish community. And IPSI now is becoming more of its own organization. So just last year, my dad made me the director, and other outside of speaking, I'm also planning some events that kind of put us more on the map as far as black support for Israel, and being in touch with the Israeli community, the Ethiopian Jewish community, and the Mizrahi community, and just bringing that other um, perspective to people who don't really know much about the conflict, or people who do and they just need more tools and resources. So that's what IPSI does. So right now it's just me and my dad, and then my family. I have a big family. They help with either whether it's the graphics or the videography, or things like that. But It's kind of just a family operation, and we partner with a lot of different organizations as well.
That's great. No, that's really good. It's and you said you that it was started in 2012, is what you said?
Yeah, 20. I don't quote me on that. I think yeah, 2012. It
Okay.
was 2012 because I just graduated college when you started it. Yeah,
Because
that's right.
I first saw that ad for Basic in 2013. I was just bringing up on the screen the on my blog, and it was fascinating, to see this, and and I'll bring it back up because there was a full page ad in the New York Times in which they gave the positions of what Basic was, saying we
Yeah.
condemn the anti-Jewish blacklist. We believe blacks and Jews have common interests in democracy and justice. We support
Mm.
democratic Israel's right to exist.
Yep.
Arab oil policies have had disastrous effects on blacks in America and in Africa. We
Yep.
support peace through mutual recognition. We support genuine Palestinian self determination. And we will work for peace. And then there's the list of people that signed it is just a who's who of prominent
Absolutely.
Americans. It's, starting
Mm.
with Hank Aaron and going all the way down. Um,
Yep.
so my question to you is, what happened?
Mm.
We do not see that sort of support because this was a
Right.
huge number of people that were supporting it. Vernon Jordan and Julian Bond and as well as and what surprised me was Harry Belafonte, who's now a pro-Palestinian activist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where did things go so wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's something that it's still heartbreaking when just to study about it and read about it. And with part of the issue, and this is something that we're still kind of unearthing as we're researching this, me and my dad, is just it was curious to us why everything about about Basic um, was just missing. So Ipsy started the year after that, so it was 2014. So he found out about that Basic stuff and posted it online and stuff. But you read about some things about Bayard Rustin and him being pro-Israel, but Basic by name, like it was virtually like nowhere. And yeah, to me, I still don't know why it was not only was Basic nowhere, but you can find a lot of resources on Black um, anti-Israel documents. They're all over the place. Um, to me, I really can't explain it other than to say that to me it seems intentional in that, or just either intentional or just that Basic didn't really, uh, you know, there's a lot of pressure, I think, because there was a growing amount of pressure from the Black community um, to be anti-Israel, and it was very intense. And part of me believes that there was just a kind of a giving up or giving in, from the pro-Israel side, that led to just it not really being anywhere at all. And we see this time and again how the other side is very good at their propaganda campaigns about Israel. I mean, it is so prevalent, and it's everywhere. And not to say that Palestinians aren't suffering, because they definitely are, and that's absolutely true. But the way that Israel has been attacked in the media and delegitimized in the UN and things like that, it's so it's so calculated, and I think that if you're not really ready for that kind of onslaught, it can be overwhelming. And so, but that's just my opinion. I don't know, but I will say that what happened with even some of the civil rights organizations that either didn't have a stance on Israel, but they had a good relationship with the Jewish community, like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Hmm.
They had a lot of Jewish donors and friends who appreciated what did, and what people inside of SNCC were about, and their stance to be anti-Israel really started. I mean, it started from a bias. One of their members volunteered to go investigate the 1967 war in Israel afterward, and one of the biases that Claiborne Carson had laid out when he wrote about this, he said that the person who went to investigate had she had a few Palestinian friends, uh, that she would talk to regularly and discuss Israel um, and the Palestinian territory. So, not that that means she just can't do it, but there definitely was. When she came back from her investigation, Ethel Miner is her name. She had this document of all these quote unquote facts about Israel that were just completely, I mean, some of those we're still battling today as Zionists. A lot of those have been refuted, but people still hold on to them and believe them to be true, about Israel. And they use terms like genocide and even infer that, the Jews of Europe were never really had a connection to Israel. They just kind of came and colonized and things like that. That obviously, to me, she didn't really consult with or talk to um, other people other than her friends and people who don't like Israel, because the whole document, complete with a couple of very anti-Semitic drawings, was published, and pretty much since then, as that happened, they lost a lot of Jewish support, a lot of Jewish friends, and they kind of stayed true to their course. I mean, they felt like they're really doing something right.
Mhm.
And I think the more that grew, um, it's easier to feed into. It's easier to feed into hatred than it is to show someone the truth and to give them the truth. So I think that's part of it too. Is that if I want to, you know, if I don't if I don't want to do the work,
Mhm.
um, and dig, then and someone gives me something that doesn't require that much work, but gives me a person to blame, I tend to lean toward more just blaming that person, and kind of being comfortable in that. And that tends to grow a lot faster than actually taking the time to dig and see the nuances and the things that they don't tell you in mainstream news, and the things that you may not read about, but maybe it takes a lot more work to find the truth. And I think that's part of why the Black anti-Israel sentiment grew a lot more and a lot faster.
And let me suggest something, if I may.
Yeah.
The one, I think it's not just choosing a side or anything like that. I believe that for the black community to accept the narrative, both of the pro-Palestinian narrative and the social justice warrior type narrative, is too
Mm.
thick, because it's a narrative of victimhood, and
Yeah.
the way you win is to be the biggest victim.
Yeah.
And to me, and I'd like to hear if you could, if you agree or you could expand on this.
Yeah.
And because I mentioned this, I tweeted this. I said, the the Palestinians should embrace Israel as a cause, because literally you have people that were, in the 1940s were literal slaves and
Mm.
literally being slaughtered, and
Yeah.
within a couple of decades they managed to build their own. They got out of that mentality. They got out of being slaves and became a country, and became a
Hmm.
nation, and now it's a very powerful nation. It is a story of rising up out of the ashes and rising up
Yep.
out of oppression, and
Yeah.
this is something that it seems to me that the black community should be embracing.
Yeah. No, it's the to me it's the logical conclusion to what we want as a black, or what we should want as a black community. We aspire to, I mean, and we've done it too. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were slaves, and it wasn't that long ago that we weren't allowed in certain restaurants and coffee shops, and
Sure.
and couldn't vote. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. And to go from, I mean, even during the times of slavery, we have incredible stories. I mentioned Frederick Douglass. He was a slave, and he didn't read. He didn't know how to read until he was 12 years old. Um, but then he became one of the greatest minds that we know, like that in our history. Wrote books, advised presidents. I mean, there we have such a resilience, and that's part of what that bond is between Black Americans and the Jewish people, is that we've come out of such great adversity. And when we look at the Jewish people and see that they're, you know, one of the things that Malcolm X talks about is Black nationalism. It's like you see that nationalism. You see when you look at the Jewish community, they took it to its, like I said, to its logical conclusion. Okay, we're going to rise up from this, and not only rise up from this, now we're going to go back to our homeland. And not only that, but now Israel is like, up there in the charts when it comes to science and medicine and counterterrorism. I mean, this little bitty Israel has contributed so much to the world and so much to even the continent of Africa in such a short amount of time that, yeah, you would think that we as a Black community would celebrate that and aspire for that and see our own potential to rising up in that way, not necessarily forming our own country or going back to Western Africa or anything, but having but knowing that, man, there really is nothing stopping us from being at the place that we want to be, and there really is nothing stopping us from being successful and continuing to be a wonder to the rest of the world. Yeah, so I mean, but the victimhood mentality is really what is bringing us down. It's I call it, I'm sure you've heard it before, the oppression Olympics. It's like sometimes I feel like we're in a competition to see which one of us is more oppressed than the other, and it's even a fight within the Black community. It's like, I don't know if you ever heard this before, but I've heard this multiple times that straight Black men are the white people of Black people. And I'm like, you guys, why are we doing this hierarchy thing? Like, why do we have to put ourselves or see ourselves as, okay, I'm down here on the pole, therefore I have more value than you. First of all, it kind of gets us comfortable in that. I mean, if you kind of make that your identity, you're not going to ever want to come out of it. So that's one. So it's not really helping anything to move us forward.
Right.
But then two, yeah, I mean, what good does it do for us? It doesn't do any good for us while we come against people like I said, the Jewish people, for doing honestly what we want to do. If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And listen, I mean, some of the old Negro spirituals were very deliberately based on the story of the children of Israel, because
Absolutely.
that was the way that was what they aspired to, and that's what hey, go out of Egypt, go out of slavery, and
Right.
become a free people.
Absolutely.
So it's like, it seems to me, again, like it should be obvious, and it's like you said before, this is essentially a very successful propaganda campaign to
Right.
be able to look at Israel, and even worse, because they saying that Israel is a white supremacist state. I mean, it's just
Right.
like they try to put it in such stark terms, or
Yeah.
that Israel somehow trains the cops to be anti-black. I mean, ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's the danger, is that, and going back to Black Lives Matter, that is the danger, because when you can get a people that emotional and that heightened, then, and that radicalized, because that's my opinion about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, is that before they took an anti-Israel platform, they first kind of forced their former leader out, and they voted in a new leader who had a new vision that they would, kind of take more of a global stance. But the problem was, Martin Luther King had criticized them, the radicals, for being color consumed, because he said they see a kind of something mystical about being Black, and that anything non-Black is condemned. And that color consumption really is what made them malleable to being anti-Israel, because now all the Israel enemies have to do is tell you that Israel's white supremacists, or they kind of paint Israel as, like I said, these European colonizers who came and oppressed the Palestinians, who are darker. And that's it. And we're sold, because our mindsets are already there, rather than looking at something for what it is and saying, okay, but no, that is their homeland. No, they didn't just, come in and bulldoze everyone out. And no, there's always been a Jewish presence. And actually there are Jews from all over the world, including the Middle East, that, and they were kicked out of those places. Actually, they didn't just come to Israel. Like, when you look at things like for what they are, then it helps you to see what the truth is. But if you're already color consumed, then it's easy, because all someone has to say is Jim Crow, and you're triggered, and you can't see anything else other than what they want you to see at that point.
Right.
You know?
Again, my audience is obviously overwhelmingly white. What would you suggest that we can do to help?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've since this thing happened with George Floyd, uh, I've gotten that question quite a bit, and I I I don't fully know. I do have an answer for you, and I'll give you an answer. But what I mean by that is, right now, it seems to me like we, as a people, as Black people, need to kind of almost like an in-house figure out what it is that our goal is and what we're trying to do. There's been a bigger conversation now happening about Black Lives Matter in the Black community. There's a bigger thing about, okay, what is this rioting and looting really doing? But in the Black community, which I think has been really, really a good thing for us to actually be talking to each other. Because one of the things I've been seeing is kind of mixed messaging from my own community. Some people say, you know, they want their white friends to reach out more, and you guys are being too silent, and you should be speaking out, blah, blah, blah. And then I see my other friends saying, if one more person reaches out to me and asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to lose it. So I'm like, okay, well, you guys, we can't just, that's just not fair. Like we gotta, we can't be mad at our friends if they're not really actually doing anything wrong to us. They just happen to be white while this stuff is going on. It's not really, that's not their fault. So um, I would say that really on a bigger scale, Elder, I would say that for those people who, because there are a lot of them, and I've seen GoFundMe's and I've seen them post things. Those people who have lost businesses, those Black people who have in the wake of all of this have lost everything. And I can post some links as well. To find them and to help give toward their rebuilding. Because to me, the one of the major ways out, and what I mean out, I mean one of the major ways for us as a Black community to move forward is our economic success. And so we can protest all we want, and policies can even be passed, but if we keep destroying our own stuff, we're going to be in the same place, and we're never going to move. So I think helping those of us who have lost our businesses to rebuild. Yeah, and this is not specifically for what happened with George Floyd, but just in general, is to, partner with those of us who are, there are a lot of people working in their communities that aren't attached to Black Lives Matter. They're not really a part of big organizations, but they're community leaders in our cities that do things every day, that have programs and things like that to help youth, to kind of rekindle that Black Jewish relationship and assist any way that you can. I mean, I think that, to me, my opinion is, I know that things that tensions are very high, but one of the things I tell the young people all the time, and I tell people when I'm playing shows, because I'm also a musician, I tell them that, just because all the headlines everywhere are talking about one thing doesn't mean that that's the one thing that you need to focus on. If you know what your purpose is, continue walking in that purpose, even if it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with what's being talked about. Doesn't mean you can't talk about it, doesn't mean you can't mention it, but continue doing what you're supposed to do. So I would say, even though it may not be the sexy thing to do, like I would not advise being a part of Black Lives Matter. I'm against the organization and what they stand for. But I would say that there are a lot of people who have these programs that you could be a part of, even in your own cities. There are things that you can do. And I would say partner with those people, see what they need, and help, in any way that you can.
Okay, no, yeah, if you could shoot me any of these links, I'll be very happy
Absolutely.
to put it up. That would be great. Um,
Absolutely.
so this was great. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate this, and I think my audience will as well. So again, thanks so much for being on the show, and
Absolutely.
wish you luck, and wish Ibsy luck as well. And if there's again anything else that I can do personally, or if that you can think for that any of us can do, let me know, and I'll be happy to do what I can.
Thank you so much, Elder. And I just want to say one last thing, that if anyone wants to join the mailing list for IPSI, you just go on ipsi-now.org, and you can click on the contact button and just put in your information, and you can get all the updates and what we're doing and what's coming up for this year
Okay.
and next year. So
And I believe you also have a Facebook page that looks like it's fairly active. So
yeah, yes, sir.
you can go there as
Absolutely.
well. It's just IBSI fan page, it looks like, is what it's called under.
Yes, it is.
So very good. So again, thank you very much, and wish you the best of luck. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you, Elder. I appreciate it.